Hi, my name is Soraya. And while I was sleeping on a cot in a domestic violence shelter with my 3-year-old daughter beside me, my brother Darius was telling our entire family that I was in rehab for alcohol addiction. He told our parents, he told our aunts, he told our cousins, he told anyone who asked why I had disappeared. She is getting help. She has a drinking problem. Please respect her privacy. I do not have a drinking problem. I have never had a drinking problem. I drink wine at holidays and the occasional beer at a barbecue. My problem was not alcohol. My problem was my husband, Graham, who had spent 2 years escalating from controlling to threatening to dangerous. And the shelter was the only place I could go that Graham could not find. Darius knew. He knew about Graham. He knew about the escalation. He knew I had called him at 2 a.m. 6 months earlier saying Graham threw a glass at the wall and I was scared. He said, "Come to my house." I went. I stayed one night. Graham apologized. I went back. And Darius said, "Soraya, if you go back to that man, I cannot help you anymore." He could not help me anymore. The sentence that closed the door. So when I finally left for good, when I packed a bag at 3 a.m. and drove to the shelter with Camille asleep in her car seat, I did not call Darius. I called the hotline number the shelter's website listed. A woman named Rosa answered and she said, "Come now, we have a bed." The shelter was clean and safe and anonymous. The address was confidential. The staff used first names only. The other women there were like me. Ordinary women in extraordinary situations. Women who had left at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and midnight and noon. Women with children and without. Women who flinched when doors closed too hard. I stayed for 6 weeks. During that time, my phone was turned off because Graham was tracking it. I had no contact with my family. And in that silence, Darius created a story. I found out when I emerged. I turned my phone on after 6 weeks and there were 147 messages. Not worried ones, supportive ones. Mom texting, "I am praying for your recovery." Aunt Cheryl texting, "Stay strong in treatment." Cousin Rosa texting, "We all love you. One day at a time. One day at a time." The language of addiction recovery. Applied to a woman who was hiding from a man who threw things at walls. I called Darius. "Why does the entire family think I am in rehab?" "Because I had to tell them something." He said, "You disappeared. Nobody could reach you." Graham called me saying you left in the middle of the night and took Camille. He was worried. Graham was not worried. Graham was looking for me. And you told the family I was in rehab instead of telling them the truth. The truth would have been complicated, Soraya. Mom would have panicked. Dad would have gone to Graham's house. It would have been a disaster. So you told them I was an alcoholic. That was the easier story. I told them you were getting help. Which is technically true. Technically true. I was getting help. From a shelter. Because my husband was dangerous, and instead of telling the family their daughter was in danger, Darius told them she was a drunk. The rehab story served 2 purposes. It explained my absence, and it redirected the family's concern away from Graham and toward me. Instead of asking why did Soraya leave, the family asked what is wrong with Soraya. The villain shifted from the husband who threw things to the wife who supposedly drank too much. Graham benefited from this story. He called my mother during my absence and said, "I am so worried about her. She has been struggling with alcohol for a long time. I tried to help, but she refused treatment. When she disappeared, I knew she had finally hit bottom." My mother comforted him. The man I was hiding from received comfort from my mother because my brother had given him cover. Sandra Chen helped me understand the legal landscape. She filed for divorce. She obtained a protective order. She presented the shelter's intake records, the history of escalation, and the pattern of controlling behavior. The judge granted the protective order and temporary custody. Graham was ordered out of the house. I moved back in with Camille. Then I dealt with Darius. I called a family meeting. At my parents' house. Everyone who had received the rehab story. I stood in the living room and said, "I was not in rehab. I do not have a drinking problem. I was in a domestic violence shelter because Graham was abusing me. Darius knew this and chose to tell you I was an alcoholic because the truth was inconvenient. The room was silent. Mom looked at Darius. Dad looked at the floor. Aunt Cheryl put her hand over her mouth. Darius said, I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourself. From the inconvenience of having a sister in a shelter. From the questions. From the mess. It was easier to say I was in rehab because rehab is a story people understand. A shelter is a story people have to do something about. And you did not want to do something. He did not respond. Because the truth of that sentence was visible to everyone in the room. Mom cried. She said, I comforted Graham. He called me and I comforted him. While you were in a shelter. I know, Mom. He used Darius's story to position himself as the victim. Your father and I would have come for you, if we had known. We would have come immediately. I know. That is why I am telling you now. So you know what happened. And so you know who helped, and who made it worse. Dad stood up. He walked to Darius. He said, you told your family your sister was an alcoholic while she was hiding from a violent man. That is not protection. That is betrayal. And if you cannot see the difference, you have more to learn than she does. That is the image. Not the shelter, not the cot, not the 147 messages about one day at a time. My father standing in his living room looking at his son and saying the word betrayal. And my mother sitting on the couch understanding that the man she comforted was the man her daughter was running from. The truth is louder than any cover story. And the family that was told I was in rehab now knows I was in a shelter. And the shift in their eyes, from pity to fury, from what is wrong with Soraya to what did Graham do, was the most validating thing I have ever witnessed. I was not the problem. I was never the problem. And the story Darius told to make me the problem is over. If someone ever rewrote your crisis to protect themselves or the person who was hurting you, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. I will be back next week. Next time, the sister who took my wedding dress to her own wedding. I found out from the photographer's Instagram. Darius apologized. 3 weeks later, at my kitchen table. He said, I panicked. You were gone. Graham was calling everyone. The family was asking questions. And the fastest answer was the one that did not require me to say your husband is dangerous. Because saying my husband was dangerous would have required action, I said. And you did not want to act. He nodded. I did not want to act. I did not want to call the police. I did not want to confront Graham. I did not want to drive to a shelter at 3 a.m. I wanted the problem to be yours. And rehab made the problem yours. He was crying. I let him. Not out of compassion. Out of necessity. Because the tears were the first honest thing he had produced in 6 weeks. Can you forgive me? He asked. I can hear you, I said. Forgiveness takes longer than a kitchen table conversation. We are working on it. Slowly. The way siblings work on things when one of them labeled the other an alcoholic, and the other is trying to decide whether the label is forgivable. Aunt Cheryl drove 4 hours to see me after the family meeting. She brought food and blankets, and the kind of aggressive aunt energy that makes problems smaller just by being in the room. She said, if I had known you were in a shelter, I would have driven there at 3 a.m. and brought you home myself. I know, Auntie. That is why Darius did not tell you. Because you would have acted. And action was the thing he was avoiding. She held me for a long time. Then she said, your mother and I raised you to be strong. And hiding in a shelter at 3 a.m. with a baby is the strongest thing you have ever done. Do not let anyone, not Darius, not Graham, not anyone, tell you that strength looks like rehab when it actually looks like a woman carrying her daughter to safety in the dark. That is the sentence I carry now. Strength looks like a woman carrying her daughter to safety in the dark. Not like a woman in a treatment center. Not like the story Darius told. Like the truth. The shelter sent me a card on the anniversary of my intake. It said, 1 year. You are still standing. I am still standing. In my house. With my daughter. With a protective order and a divorce decree and a family that now knows the truth. Camille is 4 now. She does not remember the shelter. She does not remember the cot or the women who flinched at doors or the drive at 3 a.m. She remembers her room in our house, her toys, her bed with the purple sheets. She said last week, "Mommy, I like our house." "I like it too, baby. Is Daddy coming back?" "No, baby. Daddy is not coming back." Good. The house is better without the loud. Without the loud. A 4-year-old's description of domestic violence. The loud. The thing that fills a house until you cannot hear anything else. The thing you drive away from at 3 a.m. The thing a brother calls rehab because the truth is louder than he can handle. The house is quiet now. The good kind of quiet. The kind where the only sounds are a child playing and a mother breathing and a door that stays closed because nobody on the other side is trying to get in. Quiet, safe, ours, and the calendar on the kitchen wall says March 7th. Camille's birthday, written in purple. Because this house celebrates daughters. Every single one. That is the ending. Not the shelter. Not the cot. Not the lie. A quiet house. A purple birthday. A daughter who thinks the world is peaceful because her mother made it that way. 1 3 a.m. drive at a time.